of creating, and then we end up talking about grace at the end of it. So that's an awesome thing to kind of work through everything, because even in the beginning of creating everything, we still see God's grace. We still see all these things that he's working in there. You know, grace was not a new concept that appeared all of a sudden in Matthew. God has always shown mankind his grace. So when we go back through the cycles again, one of the things that we're learning is we need to change our mindsets. We need to change the way that we see things. We need to change some of the ways of some of the things that we call some things. Because what we say about something affects how we approach it, right? And so, I could say certain words or phrases, they have the same meaning, but certain words have a kind of a negative connotation to them. Some words we hear and we're like, oh. And in other words, it's like, yeah, Even the way you say something, it really causes an impact. How many of you think about this? You got to go to work tomorrow. You say, I heard the collective groan. Oh. But what if I told you, tomorrow I'm going to give you an opportunity to make some cash? It's a little different, because when you're like, oh yeah, well I kind of need that. And on the other side of it, what do you mean work? Oh man, I got to work, But think about it. One of the first things that Adam was charged with is work. He was told to tend the garden, to work it, and to serve in it, to protect it, to keep it. So there's a lot to be said in that, okay? Now, when we go through Bresheit, Genesis, or in the beginning, man, it's such a loaded portion. I'm like, when they determined and broke down the Torah portions, why would they do that to us? You read chapters 1 through 5 in Genesis, and like, there's so much throughout this whole... And we got to cover it in 1 week? We got to cover it in one shot? So we're not going to get to everything. Absolutely not. But there is one main point I do want to talk about. But before we get there, I do feel the need to just kind of address something else really quickly. Many of you know, some of you may not, but for the sake of getting it recorded and getting it out here, because we have a lot of people who are watching who are new and don't know some of these things, right? So for the sake of helping to put some of these things out there, I do want to go over Genesis 1:1 really quick. Okay? First off, the very first letter of the Torah scroll is not the first letter of the alphabet. We think in the very first of the beginning, in the very first of all things, why wouldn't he make it the very first letter, right? Not necessarily so. Because again, it's not about what letter comes first. It's about setting up the intent for everything. And when you look at a Torah scroll, the first letter is written larger than the rest of the letters. We just went through Simchat Torah. We just rolled the scroll back, and so many of you got to see some of the jots and the tittles in the scroll and see some of these really interesting things in the scrolls that you don't always see in other places. One of these things is that bet is larger than the other letters. Now that draws your attention to that, doesn't it? You're looking, if you're reading in just a regular text, and all of a sudden there's this one letter really big on a page, what are you going to do? When you're reading it, it's going to draw your attention to it, right? Okay, here's the point. What does Beit represent? A house. And so from the very beginning of everything, Yahweh is creating and building a house. So what's the point of a house? It's not like four walls. No, the house is a place where he can dwell with that which he created. It is a place of safety, it is a place of protection, and it is a place of boundaries of that which he has created to function as it was created. So in the house that he is building for creation, we have a place to dwell. It is a place to honor him, a place to meet with him. I mean, he placed Adam in the garden, and then it says that Yah walked with him in the cool of the day. So it was a place to meet with that which he loved, that which he created, and that which he desired. Okay? Now, we talk about Messiah being in the beginning, right? And so how do we see the lamb that was slain from before the foundation of the world? How do we see the beginning of everything in Genesis 1:1? Where do we see Yeshua in Genesis 1:1? because he's represented there. So let's go through that really quick. Bereshit 1:1 reads, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. Now, the interesting thing is when you translate the scripture, they translate 6 letters. They do not translate 7. But there's 7 words there. There are 7 words there, one of which they don't translate. And in that is where we find the Messiah represented. How so? We go forward, all the way forward. Go to Revelation. Yeshua says, I am, we hear the Alpha Omega, right? Beginning and the end. My thought for this, who is he talking to? John, right? John. Hi, John. He's writing to John. Why would he be speaking to someone who speaks Hebrew and Greek? You mean God speaks Hebrew? Think about this for a second. Rav Shaul, when he had this amazing moment, he got knocked off his horse and was blinded, right? He specifically states, and I heard a voice in Hebrew. Why would he be speaking to him in Hebrew? He could speak to him in Greek because they knew Greek, right? He spoke to him in Hebrew. And you get a group of people where their native tongue is one language. Well, when they get together, what do they speak? They speak what's common. They speak their normal native tongue. No matter how many languages they speak, right? So here we have someone who spoke Hebrew speaking to someone who spoke Hebrew. Why would he speak Greek? Now, he may be writing to a Greek audience, but why would he be speaking to him in Greek? Here's the thought. I submit to you, just food for thought, that instead of saying Alpha Omega, maybe he said aleph-tav. The beginning and the end, the first and the last. Because Alpha Omega is the first and the last letter of the Greek alphabet. But together they mean nothing. It's the first and the last letter of the alphabet. It's not a word. But if you take the aleph and tav, the first and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and you put those together, it is a word. But it's a word that's not translated. It doesn't have a translation. And it's a word that's in the Torah scroll over 7,000 times without a translation. Even in modern Hebrew, when the word is used, they say, well, it doesn't have a translation, but when it's used, it points toward a definite article. Yeah, it does. And they say, oh no, it's just something, it's just a linguistic term, just used to help to bring. Okay, here's the thing. The aleph-tav does not follow the rules of grammar when we see it in the scriptures all the time. Okay? So there's something else there. Okay? So I say this. Instead of saying Alpha Omega, maybe he said aleph-tav. And when he said aleph-tav, maybe he was representing, he was there in the very beginning of everything. And if we look at it that way, we find Bereshit, bara, Elohim, aleph-tav. Elohim, aleph-tav. Who's the aleph-tav? That's Yeshua. And then hashamayim ve'et haaretz. You say, well, but the aleph-tav is there again before the land. Okay, but think about this for a second. So we have the aleph-tav in hashamayim. What's hashamayim? The heavens. And then we have va. What's the vav? And. So that's what's translated is the vav. The aleph-tav after it is not translated. It's and the et haaretz, the earth, the land. Now here's something else that's interesting. The vav in the Hebrew represents a tent spike, a peg. It is a conjunction that means and it means to join something together. So what we have is we have the aleph-tav heavens, and then when we find the earth, the vav is there with it. The spikes being there in the earth with it. I submit to you like this. When Yeshua was in the heavens, he was in the heavens. When he came to earth, that's when we saw the spike. So just food for thought. More stuff to think about. Okay? Even the word for a sign. Ot is aleph, vav, aleph-tav. It's the aleph-tav with a spike being driven in the middle of it. And it's a sign. We know Yeshua said he is a sign. That when he is lifted up, it is a sign. So again, there's things like this that we find in the Hebrew that we don't really see in a translated text. Okay, and I'm not knocking translations, guys, because not everybody speaks Hebrew. We do the best we can with what we got, right? But there are things you find in the Hebrew text that you're not going to see anywhere else. See, and this is why it's important to really understand what's being said in the Scripture. We got to learn the way it was written, right? Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop with that. Because we can go on, we've done teachings on the aleph-tav, we've done other stuff on this before, we can go a little more and show you some other things, but I really feel we need to step into this next part, okay? So we're going to jump forward through chapter 1 into chapter 2. We're going to talk about Shabbat. Now, Shabbat, the word Shabbat means to cease, to stop. Okay, something it stops. But I want to show you something, that Shabbat is not just stop work and that's it. That's all Shabbat is. Because there are things that we're told about Shabbat. One, Shabbat is a time to stop, but it's also a time to not just stop working, but to stop creating. In 6 days, God created everything. Then he wanted everything to reproduce after like kind. He created, and then that which he created was creating. Okay? The last thing he created was the Shabbat. Think about that for a second. So we have here, Genesis 2:2. On the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work he had done. The way this reads makes us think he rested from all his work. We're like, whew. Man, I'm exhausted. Kick back in the lazy boy, right? No. Because, again, the word there, it doesn't mean just like, okay, he was beat, so he rested. It means he stopped creating. If he didn't stop creating on the sixth day, he would have kept creating, continuing through more days. But he created 6 days, then he created the seventh. Okay? Now here, this word that's used here, God finished his work, is the Hebrew word malachah. Malachah, which is oftentimes translated as employment, work, property, labor, workmanship. The work that was done in building the tabernacle, the Mishkan, is called malachah. So this is why many people talk about, so what kind of work is not done on Shabbat? And this is why they say, well, anything that was done in the building of the tabernacle would be considered malachah work, so that's what you don't do. There's a lot of areas you can get into stuff like this, okay? Here's the big one, guys. We have to be careful that we're not just following a list of rules of do's and don'ts, okay? And I understand the need to want to get it right. I do. I really do. But we can be so concerned with our need to get it right that we completely miss the heart of it in the first place. That we can try to struggle so hard to get it perfect that we forget the meaning of it. And in essence, trying to do it in our own strength. You know, we're so good at, I've got to do this. And God said, no, he's the one who did it. He created everything in the 6 days. The seventh, stop the creating to enjoy that which has been created. That's why he says you work the 6 days, and then in the seventh, you rest. Because you work the 6 days, and then in the seventh day, you enjoy that which, the fruit of your labor. And it's not just taking a day off occasionally. There's more to it than that. How many of you heard, well, you know, my Sabbath? That's the problem. It's not yours. It's his. But the Sabbath was created for man. It doesn't mean man can change it. So there's a lot going in here, okay? So, Genesis 1:1, he says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. There, the word for create there is bara. Bara, which is, again, to create. And so God created, then he fashioned it all together and put it all together. All right? So then we have the two words there, bara and malachah. So Shabbat is a time that is set apart. It is a time that is sanctified. I think we can all agree with that in this room, right? The thing is, understand the very first time the word that something was set apart as holy, first time that word is used, is in reference to Shabbat. And so we think about, God says, you are a holy people. You are to be holy because I am holy. So how do we separate that which God has called holy and say, if we are holy, we are not to have anything to do with that which is holy? It doesn't work that way, does it? If we are a holy people, then we are set apart and sanctified to be a part with those things that are called holy. And the Sabbath was the very first thing that was called holy. So where does that put us? If we're a holy people, we honor. Now, Genesis 2, 1 through 3. So thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work he had done. So God what? Blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God ceased creating. He rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So what we have here is first God blessed it, and he set it apart as holy. Now, he blessed Adam and Chava. He spoke blessings during the creating time. But the first thing that he blessed, because he blessed that which was alive. The first thing he blessed was the Shabbat. First thing he set aside as holy was the Shabbat. And again, where does that put us? He created everything in 6. He ceased creating, and then he created Shabbat. After he created Shabbat, he stopped. So given this manner, Shabbat is the crown of creation. He created everything, built the foundation up, built it all on top, and he finished it all off right at the very top with a glory, with a blessing, and being set apart as holy. Think about this. Adam was created on what day? On the 6th day. So he was created on the 6th day. So the very first full day he experienced was the 7th, was Shabbat. How amazing is that? He was created, and then he enters into this time of relationship, this time of spending time with his Father, spending time with Yahweh. Okay, Adam entered into the rest to enjoy that which was created. And then, what did God say to the things that he created? To continue. That which I have done here, we continue. I created, so you create. I worked, you work. I did this in 6 days, you work in 6 days. I stopped on the 7th, you stop on the 7th. I blessed, I want you to bless. He wants us to follow in like manner. I mean, doesn't he want us to be like him? To be more like him? Isn't that what we say all the time? We say, Father, I want to be more like you. So that's what we're doing. When we stop on Shabbat and we spend time with him, it's a relationship thing. It's not a rule thing, although it is. But it's about relationship. So when we approach the Shabbat, do we do it with joy? Do we do it with expectancy? Or do we do it grudgingly? I mean, think about this. 6 days, you work. 7th day, oh man, I can't work tomorrow. Who does that? Well, I used to. Truth be told, I used to. But it was hard for me to understand that it is more productive for me to work in the 6 days and take that 7th off. It is more beneficial to me to work 6 days and take the 7th off. Because in that 7th, I'm being rejuvenated physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. I'm being called back into the presence of my Father. Because we should have fellowship with him every day. But let's face it, in the 6 days, in the busyness of life and all the other things, our mind comes off of him from time to time. I'm not saying we've forsaken him. It's just we got to do things. And so he's not at the forefront of our very thought. He should be, but he's not. So the seventh day is a reminder to us to call us back in, to bring us back into that place of relationship and communion that he's desiring for us. Okay? All right. So the question is it Sabbath or is it Shabbat? And potato, right? In a manner of speaking, yes. In a manner of speaking, no. If you say Sabbath, I'm not going to go off on you. Okay? But there is a difference. Okay? Now, like I said, I'm not trying to tell people to cause arguments and to cause divisions, anything like that. But we know what you call something does affect how you approach it and how you think about it, right? So is it Sabbath or Shabbat? How many of you have heard things like, I'm going to take a sabbatical? Does that mean you've worked 6 years and you're going to take the 7th off? No, it just means I'm taking a break. Okay? And that's where we get things like, well, my Sabbath is this day. You know, my Sabbath is Wednesdays because I have to work all the other days, and so I'm going to take Wednesdays as my Sabbath. I'm going to make that day the day I don't work. Is that what God said? See, Shabbat has a certain time, a certain framework. It has guidelines. Sabbath is a time that we set and we control the boundaries of. We can't change Shabbat. So like I said, it's a matter of semantics. Is it Sabbath or Shabbat? Yes. But for the sake of separating for clarification, that's where we get into a lot of gray areas. They're not. But that's where we get into a lot of these areas where people start trying to make excuses. Right? Because let's face it. God said do this, and anything that we try to rebut that with, well, it's an excuse. Okay? Because, you know, when we stand before our Father, he's going to say, well, this is what I asked you to do. Well, see, here's the thing. Okay? So let's take a look at this. Exodus 16:26 says, 6 days you shall gather, the manna that was given, 6 days you shall gather. On the 7th day, what does it say next? Which is the Sabbath. On the 7th day, which is Shabbat, there shall be no manna. So it's not just a matter of, I'm going to pick a cycle and then every 7 days. No, that's not what it says. He says the 7th day, which is Shabbat. Think about this. They're in the camp, they get manna 6 days, right? So what if somebody says, yeah, that's the day they do it, I'm going to do it on this day. So they go out to collect the manna. It's Shabbat. They're calling it the 3rd day of the week. There's no manna. So guess what? All Israel dwelling together knew which day Shabbat was. If they had any question, it's the day there was no manna. Okay? So there was no argument about that. Further, when Yeshua was here, at what point did he tell them, hey, you guys, you got this whole Shabbat day wrong. I came to change the day. Didn't you know that? He never said anything like that. Okay? So there is a day that is set aside that is called it. Okay? And I'm going to prove it to you. For those of you who know this, cool. For those of you who don't, you're going to see it for the first time then. In the Hebrew, in the days of the week, this is how they're listed. All right? First day is Yom Rishon. Yom Rishon literally means first day. Make sense? Okay. Next one, Yom Sheni. Yom Sheni is 2nd day. Okay, the next one, Yom Shlishi. Yom Shlishi literally is 3rd day. Are you seeing a trend? Right? So what do you think comes next? First day, 2nd day, 3rd day, what do you think? 4th day. Right? I'm not trying to trick you. Okay? You're like, no, that's too easy. No, really? 4th day, Yom Revi'i. Okay? So then after 4th day comes, what day? 5th day. Okay, you're catching it. You're getting on. 5th day is Yom Hamashi. After 5th day comes 6th day, Yom Shishi. This is where it gets tricky now. So 1st day, 2nd day, 3rd day, 5th day, 6th day, what comes next? Shabbat. Think about this. What day is Shabbat? The one named Shabbat. It has a name. It is the day that the name follows suit. So what day is Shabbat? It comes after Yom Shishi. It comes before Yom Rishon, 7th. So what day is it? The 7th day. Well, yeah, but the Sabbath was given to Israel at the mountain. Really? So up until the mountain, we only had 6 days of the week. No. In the very beginning, he created 6 days. He created the 7th. And then it started over again. See? So we see from the very beginning, the Father is setting aside a time for us to gather with Him, to gather with His people, and to honor Him. And there's a reason for this. I'll show you the scriptures here coming up soon, but God says that you are to keep Shabbat because it is a sign for you that He sets you apart. It is a sign for you that He makes you holy. It's a seal for you. And the word for sign is ot, which is the same word we would use for a token or a wedding ring. This is a sign that you don't belong to you, you belong to somebody else. The Sabbath is a sign that you belong to someone else. You belong to the Most High. Well, we find throughout Scripture, among other things, Yahweh sanctifies time, He sanctifies space, He sanctifies people. We find He sanctifies things, which I'm going to put people in with that, things that were created, right? So in this, how do we see certain things that have been sanctified? Again, when I talk about sanctified, being set apart as holy, we talk about Shabbat. But what else do we find given the same way? How about the Mishkan? Because as the Mishkan was a sanctuary in the midst of Israel, Shabbat is a sanctuary in the place of time. Think about it for a second. The Mishkan had a place, it had boundaries, and people could come in and they were to worship and they were to honor and they were to be given in this place that was set apart and sanctified. Shabbat is a place that is sanctified in time. It has borders, it has boundaries. The tent of meeting was called the Ohel Moed. Ohel is tent. Moed is a meeting. Moed is an assembly. It's a gathering. How about this? The appointed times of Yahweh, they're called Moedim. Leviticus chapter 23, right? So what's the first of the Moedim? Oh, it's easy. Passover, right? If you go back and you read it, the very first verses before Passover's even mentioned is Shabbat. And he says, 6 days you work, the 7th day is Shabbat. These are the Moedim. So the very first and the foundation of all the Moedim is Shabbat. But the Shabbat and the Mishkan both are given specific appointments to meet with His people. Think about that for a second. A specific appointment that the Most High, the one that created everything, He wants to be with you. He wants to meet with you. And He said, He literally marked the date on the calendar for you. So much so, He put it in stone. Think about it. The Mishkan, the tent of meeting. It was a holy place with defined limits. It had borders. The Mishkan was to be holy and undefiled. Israel was to prepare themselves before they entered into it. If they entered into the Mishkan unprepared, well, it wouldn't go well for them. And then once you entered into the Mishkan, you could do so fully expecting to meet with Yahweh, because He said He would meet you there. Right? What about Shabbat? It is a holy time with defined borders. We are told to prepare ourselves for Shabbat and to keep it holy. When you enter into Shabbat, you're doing so with the expectation of meeting your God. And he said he would meet with you there. Think about that, guys. That is amazing, right? Exodus 31:13. So speak to the children of Israel and say, my Shabbats you shall keep, for it is a what? Sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know I am Yahweh that sanctifies you. So he says the Shabbat is a sign so that you would know he sanctifies you. See, like we've said before, you don't make yourself holy. He makes you holy. And he told us not to defile ourselves. And then he said that by keeping Shabbat, we are acknowledging that he is the one that sanctifies us. We don't do it on our own. He does it. Okay? Now let's take a look at this. 31:13-17, we just read 13. You shall keep Shabbat because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days, what? Work is to be done. Notice that's a double-sided command. It's not just to rest on the seventh day. No, 6 days work. Right? So 6 days work is to be done. But the seventh day is Shabbat of solemn rest. Holy to Yahweh. Holy to who? Holy to Yahweh. Whoever does any work on the Shabbat is to be put to death. Verse 16. Therefore the people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout their generations as a covenant. How long? Forever. It is a sign between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days Yahweh made the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. That's what he desires for us. Okay? So let's take a look at a few scriptures regarding Shabbat. Ezekiel 20. So that was back in the Torah. What about the prophets? Ezekiel 20, 10-13. So I led them out of Egypt into the desert. I gave them my commands and taught them my laws, which bring life to anyone who obeys them. 12. I made the keeping of Shabbat a sign of the agreement to us to remind them of what? That I, Yahweh, make them holy. Verse 13. But even in the desert they defied me. They broke my laws, rejected my commands, which bring life to anyone who obeys them. They completely profaned Shabbat. See, so it's not just something that God took lightly. It's not just something he instituted after Israel came out of Egypt. No, this was back from the very back in the very beginning. Okay? And he says his desire from the very beginning was to keep Shabbat with his people. Ezekiel 20:18. So instead I warned the young people among them, do not keep the laws your ancestors made. Do not follow their customs or defile yourselves with their idols. So what does that mean? What's he talking about? Why would he say something like this? Because the people walked away from God. They did their own thing, and they served idols. Okay? So he's saying, don't defile yourselves by walking in the ways of the idolatry that your ancestors did. Verse 19. I am Yahweh your God. Obey my laws and my commands. Verse 20. Make Shabbat a holy day, so that it will be a sign of the covenant we made, and will remind you that I am Yahweh your God. Think about this. He says that the Shabbat is to remind you he is your God. Now, how many times do we read through the scripture when we find I am Yahweh and then he says something? Why would he say something like that? I mean, we know who's talking to us. Why would he keep saying it? Because we need reminded of it. He's about to tell us something, and if for no other reason, he wants us to observe it because he is our God. If he is our God, then there are things that he desires for us. If he is not our God, then we're going to do whatever we want. But if he is our God, then we will learn to walk in his ways. Isaiah 66, 22 and 23. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, says Yahweh, so shall your seed and your name remain. Think about this, guys. When is this? Yeah, cough drop. When is this? Has this happened yet? It says, as the new heavens and the new earth. My goodness. If this is the new heavens and the new earth, we got trouble, right? So we've established this is for a time yet to be, right? Verse 23. So it shall come to pass that from one Rosh Chodesh to another, and from one Shabbat to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, says Yahweh. So even on Rosh Chodesh, and from Shabbat to Shabbat. Guys, that's amazing. Because we have the Moedim, but then we even have Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh isn't listed in Leviticus 23, but we find that there are times of Rosh Chodesh where the people were gathered in together. They would come, they would bring their offerings, they would go to the temple, they would honor Yah in the acknowledgement of the month to month to month for the seasons. And Yahweh said this was honorable to him. Then he says, in a time that is yet to be in the new heavens and the new earth, all flesh will come to worship, even on Rosh Chodesh. From one Rosh Chodesh to another, to another, to another. And from Shabbat to Shabbat. It doesn't mean all week long. That means every Shabbat. So, again, if these are important for him, why would we blow them off? Why would we say it's not important for us, right? So the next question is this. Is Shabbat an Old Testament thing? Oh, yeah. See, the Shabbat was for just the people in the Old Testament. Really? So when Yeshua came, because we read that in the Gospels, right? When Yeshua came, did he keep Shabbat? Absolutely. So look at this. Thank you. So was Shabbat an Old Testament thing? No. Was it observed differently in the Brit Hadashah? Was it? No. Did Yeshua observe it? Yes. How about his disciples? Yes. How about Rav Shaul? Did Shaul observe Shabbat? Yes. Did we find anywhere in there where they told the people around them, guys, you got the wrong day? No. No. Let's take a look at it. Did Yeshua violate Shabbat? No. But when you talk about this is where people often go. Luke 6. So one Shabbat, while Yeshua was passing through some wheat fields, his Talmidim began plucking the heads of grain, rubbing them between their hands, and eating the seeds. Some of the Perishim, the Pharisees, said, why are you violating Shabbat? Were they violating Shabbat? No. Is it permissible to eat on Shabbat? Yes. Shabbat's not a fast day. Okay? The thing is, if you're walking through, if you were hungry, they pluck, rub, they eat. Is that work? They're not harvesting. They're not coming down and like planting and making major things. They're not making a banquet. They're not, none of that, okay? There was no violation there. They were permitted to pick and eat. But, again, we set boundaries for our understanding. So what was really going on was they were looking at the boundaries of these things. Now, Yeshua didn't really take so much as to address that as he did to address the people and the heart that was being involved there. Because he said, it's important that we fulfill what the Father's heart and desires are. He even saying things like, have you not read that the priests profane Shabbat, but they're blameless? How so? How does that work? How come the priest violates Shabbat? We don't, but he says he's blameless. Because you know how he profaned Shabbat? By making the offerings. Because, guys, that was work. But the offerings that were done on Shabbat, they did twice the offerings in the morning and the evening. The service for Yom Kippur is called the Avodah. That's work. So, what we're talking here is the priesthood still had responsibilities, especially on Shabbat. Because it was part of these things that drawing near to the Father through worship. When the people would come to the temple, they would come to worship. These offerings were brought through hearts of worship. These things that were happening because of worship. Sometimes, guys, worship's work. But your work isn't worship. Although your work can reveal what you worship, depending on how it's done. See what I did there? Yeah. So where was Yeshua on Shabbat? Here's a really quick answer. In the synagogues. Because when we find the references, we find this is where he was. Mark 1:21. They entered Capernaum, and on Shabbat, Yeshua went where? To the synagogue, and he was teaching. Mark 6:2. So when the Shabbat day was come, he began to teach in where? The synagogue. Many hearing were astonished. Okay, Luke 4:16. So he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and check this out. As the custom of the Jews was, no, what does it say? As his custom was, he went to the synagogue on what day? Shabbat, and he stood to read. He was gathering in the synagogues with the Jews on Shabbat. You can't really see it any other way. So again, here, even Luke 4:31. He came down to Capernaum, the city of Galilee, and taught them on Sabbath days. Luke 6:6. Came to pass also on another Shabbat, he entered into where? The synagogue, and he taught with a man with the right hand. Luke 13:10. So he was teaching in one of the synagogues on Shabbat. Acts 13:14. How about this? But when they, speaking of Rav Shaul and his companions, departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and they went into the synagogue on Shabbat, and they sat down. Acts 13:44. So the next Sabbath day came, and almost the whole city gathered together to hear the word of God. Acts 15:21. This is James speaking. This is in Acts 15, at the council that was here in Acts 15, is the idea of, okay, we have people who are Gentiles, they're of the nations, they're not Israel, they're coming to the God of Israel, and they don't know the first thing about the Scripture, they don't know anything about who He is, what He has said, really all they know is what they're experiencing right now, and they want to serve Him, and they don't know how. So, we've got all these people, and they're causing havoc everywhere. What do we do with them? Right? So this is what was addressed. And it says in Acts 15:21, James is speaking, he says, I'm going to give them these four things as a starting point, and then he goes to this fifth one, which, by the way, the four things, really issues of like kosher and idolatry, fornication, things like that. But then this fifth one is never talked about. What's the fifth one? Because Moses from old time has in every city them that preach him being read where? In the synagogues every Sabbath day. What he's saying is, these four things are your starting point. Go to the synagogues on Shabbat so that you can hear the Torah taught, so that you can learn what it says. Acts 18:4. So he reasoned in the synagogue every Shabbat and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. Colossians 2:16 and 17. How many of you guys have heard Colossians 2 used in the context of like doing away with Shabbat? Here's the problem. It reads actually the opposite of the way people see it. Because it says, don't let anyone judge you in eating or drinking, or in the part of a feast, or of a new moon, the Rosh Chodesh, or of the Shabbat, which are a shadow of things coming in the body as of the Messiah. So here's the thing. We know that the feast and the Moedim, these things point to Yeshua, but nowhere does it say he changed them. It doesn't say, don't let anybody judge you in your non-observance of a feast day, the Moedim, or even a Rosh Chodesh, or of the Sabbath. Don't let anybody judge you in your non-observance of these things. It's not what he's saying. He's saying, don't let anyone judge you in your observance of these things, because they are a shadow of the Messiah. Because in it, you see the Messiah. So, again, it's kind of different than the way that we've traditionally been taught. Hebrews 4, 1 through 11. Therefore let us fear, lest perhaps a promise having been left to enter his rest, that any of you may seem to come short. Verse 2, for indeed we have had the gospel preached to us, even as they also, but the word did not profit those hearing it, not having been mixed with faith in the ones who heard. Think about this. When the word is given to you, we receive it in faith to walk in it. If the word is given to us and we do not receive it in faith, it's not going to do us any good. It's just going to be a story. Okay? Verse 3, for we, the ones believing, enter into the rest, even as he said, I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest, though the works had come into being from the foundation of the world. For he has spoken somewhere about the seventh day. Why would he be talking about rest and talking about the seventh day? For he spoke somewhere on the seventh day, so God rested from all his works in the seventh day, verse 5. And in this again, they shall not enter into my rest, which was quoting Psalm 95:11. Therefore, since it remains for some to enter into, wait, what? What's it say? It remains for some to enter into. What remains? What was he just talking about? Shabbat. So therefore, since it remains for some to enter into it, and those who formerly had the gospel preached did not enter because of disobedience, they did not enter because of disobedience, they did not enter into Shabbat because they were disobedient. Again, he makes out the certain day, saying, in David, the day after so long a time, according as he has said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. For if Joshua gave them rest, then they would not have afterwards spoken about another day. So if it was just a matter of them coming into the land and so that he can give them rest, it would not be spoken about anymore another day. No, there remains a rest. Even after they went into the land, there remained a rest for them. That day, that rest was called Shabbat. And it was to be an honor and a time, week to week to week, that was given to them. Verse 9. So then there remains a Sabbath of rest to the people of God. For he, entering into his rest, he himself also rested from his works as God rested from his own. Therefore, let us what? Exert ourselves to enter into that rest, that not anyone fall in the same example of disobedience. Think about this. Let us exert ourselves to rest. Let us strive to rest. How do we do that? Very simple. 6 days you work, and you make preparation to enter into the seventh so you don't have to. So you can enjoy that which you have labored for. And so that you can spend that time, not just, okay, I'm not working, I'm honoring Sabbath, but your mind is nowhere near spiritual things. You're not worrying about nothing to do with your brother. Really. It's not just a matter of actively stop resting. It is not about what you're not doing as much as it is what you are doing. Okay? Because like I said, we get so concerned with the list of do's and don'ts that we miss the point. Whole point is not what I can't do. The point is, what does the Father desire for us to do today to draw near to him that we're forsaking the rest of the week and not doing? It's a shift of mindset. Shabbat observance, there's a few scriptures here. There's not a complete list, okay? But here's just a few things. Exodus 35. So Moshe assembled the whole community, the people of Israel. He said to them, these are the things that Adonai has ordered you to do. He says he wanted them to build the Mishkan, and that was important, right? Think about this. God said, I want you to prepare a place for me to dwell. I'm going to come be with you. We're going to dwell together. And the people are excited. They want this done. They want Yah in their midst. They want his presence there. So they're excited and they're trying to get this done. You think about that. If God says, I want you to build a place for me to dwell, and as soon as you're done, I'm going to come down and inhabit it. Be like, that's it, man. We're putting shifts on. We're working 24/7, 365 till this is done. Right? So as important as it was for them to do that, God said, even in the building of the Mishkan, work 6 days. Don't work the seventh. Because if you work the 6 days and then you continue to work on the seventh, then you're missing the point of the sanctified place that he is giving you because you're forsaking the sanctified time. Think about it. In our wisdom, well, let's crank this out. God's wisdom, don't forget why you're doing it. There's a difference. 6 days work is to be done. The seventh day is a holy day for you, a Shabbat of complete rest in honor of Adonai. Whoever does any work on it is to be put to death. So, building the Mishkan was important. But even so, Yahweh says, stop. Although the priesthood, like we said earlier, the priesthood still worked on Shabbat. But the priestly service was permissible. Because you don't stop worshiping him on Shabbat. Okay? You worshiped every day, okay? But especially on Shabbat. Okay? So what is your priestly service? What are the things you do on Shabbat? Well, it's seeking the pleasure in Yah. It's not seeking your own pleasure. Because, even think about this. Well, I like to rest and kick back and watch the tube for a while. Okay. So what you're saying is you're going to kick back, you're going to watch TV so your mind can go blank and go numb, and you're not really going to pray or honor God or seek him. let's stop making excuses. And let's examine our hearts in the midst of it. Are we doing things on Shabbat that are productive in His pleasure? Things that build relationship. Things that build honor. Think about that, because that's what He desires for us. What are one of the things we do on Shabbat? Gather with the assembly. And I know, guys, I'm going to say this, I know there's a lot of people that live in very far, sparse out places where they really don't have anybody else of like mind that they can gather with. My question then, are you trying to pursue that? Are you attempting to try to find that? Because Scripture tells us, don't forsake assembling together. We need to assemble. Well, I like to assemble on the other days. You know what? My thinking, honestly, great. Assemble any day you want. You can gather any day. But it doesn't change what Shabbat is. And Shabbat, one of the things for Shabbat was you gather. It's tough, right? But think about it. Look, Adonai said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel the designated times of Adonai, they're not the designated times of the Jews. They're designated times of Yahweh. The designated times of Adonai, you're to proclaim as holy convocations, my designated time. What is a convocation? It's a holy gathering. It is a called out assembly. It's public. Okay? So this is a gathering for the people. Well, how come then when he says to Israel when they're in the camp, he says nobody's to leave their tent? Because they were all camped around the tabernacle. To them go out and working and doing things outside of that was normal for them. So what he was telling them was to stop all the work. But they were already all gathered together, guys. We're not seeing that part. So work is to be done 6 days. The seventh day is a Shabbat of complete rest. So see, it's a day of complete rest, right? But it says also, there's a holy convocation. So how do you have a day of complete rest and holy convocation? Remember what we said rest was? Rest is not just, I'm sleeping in. Rest means you stop working, you stop creating, so you stop all that and you do that. It's not just stop the work, it's and you do that. Okay? It's kind of like when Yah brought us out of Egypt. If he just delivered them from Egypt and said, all right, guys, you're free. See you later. Was their deliverance complete? No. He brought them out of Egypt, brought them to himself at the mountain so that he could send them into the land to make their deliverance complete. Same thing with Shabbat. If you're just stopping to work and that's all you meant, you're not fully entering into it. Because that's the mindset. The stop is only half of it. There's also a do. These are the designated times of Adonai, holy convocations you were to proclaim at their designated times. Again, convocations, gathering times. Acts 15, 19 to 21. Again, we talked about this, right? We just talked about this just a little bit ago, but again, it fits in with this point. Because what James was telling them, these new people to the faith who don't really know anything about it are to go to the synagogue on Shabbat to hear the Torah taught, to learn the ways of Yahweh. Where did he tell them to gather? Synagogues. On what day? Shabbat. Well, couldn't they have learned the Torah any other day? Yes, absolutely. They can go any other day of the week and approach the rabbi and say, hey, can you tell me what the Torah says about this? They can learn Torah any day of the week. But it's a different dynamic when you gather on Shabbat to hear his word. One of the things we're told to do is to stop the work. Leviticus 23:3, again, work is to be done how many days? 6th day. But the what day? The 7th day is Shabbat. Okay, so again, this is making that distinction. Complete rest, holy convocation. You are not to do any kind of work. It is Shabbat for Adonai, even in your homes. That'll get us, won't it? Well, I'm not working outside the home. You're tearing it up inside, ain't you? Well, no one can see me. Huh? How about this one? Well, okay, so I'm not going to work, but I'm going to let others work for me. No. No, we don't go there either. I actually know some people who don't have a problem with this. I don't see it that way. I say, if God says that we're not supposed to work, why would I have somebody else do it for me? Because it's still for my benefit on my behalf. Deuteronomy 5:13-15, you have 6 days to labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Shabbat for Adonai your God. On it you are not to do any kind of work. Look at this. Not you, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, not your ox, not your donkey, not your other livestock, not the foreigner staying in your gates or your property. That's everybody. And think about this. Not your hired hand, right? Not the one to serve. Guess what, guys? Let's just say, for an example, you go to a restaurant. The person who waits on you is called a waiter or a server. They're serving you while you're there. You are hiring them to do that while you're there. If you go to a store, someone is ringing you up, checking you out. It's called the service industry. Think about these things. It says, you were to remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Adonai your God brought you out from there with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm. Therefore, Adonai your God has ordered you to keep the day Shabbat. But he says, not just you, any of those who have contact with you, do not force labor on them on this day. Nehemiah 10:31. So if the people of the lands bring merchandise or food to sell on Shabbat, we will not buy from them on Shabbat or on a holy day. We will forego the planting and harvesting of our fields during the seventh year, collecting the debts. When Nehemiah, he helped restore and help rebuild the walls and everything, and all the people were gathering in and having a great time. But then the mindset needed to change. Because people were still coming in, they were still selling on Shabbat, they were still doing all these things, they were buying. They didn't set apart Shabbat. Nehemiah was like, guys, this is why we were exiled in the first place. Cut it out. Right? So then they said, oh, okay, so this is what they were doing. So they said, what did Nehemiah do about the people that were coming to sell at the gates in Shabbat? Yeah, 13:19. So when the gates of Yerushalayim began to grow dark before Shabbat, I ordered that the doors be shut, and I ordered they not be reopened until after Shabbat. I put some of my servants in charge of the gates to see that no loads are brought in on Shabbat. The merchants and sellers of all kinds of goods, they spent the night outside Jerusalem once or twice. So I shut the gate, and I put guards out there to make sure that, look, guys, this city, like me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord kind of thing. In this city, we're not doing that. And so they're like, okay, we'll just camp out here, and if people want to come out here to buy, right? Verse 21. So I warned them. Why are you spending the night at the wall? Do it again, I'll use force against you. And from then on, they stopped coming on Shabbat. Seriously. Don't seek your own pleasure, but delight in His. It's like, well, I tend to enjoy quiet times with God. I just want to go out and plant and garden and all these, Okay. That was done on 6 days. And forgive me, let me just kind of put it out here like this. It's not about what you want. It's about what He wants. But I don't like that. Then that shows something about the heart, doesn't it? Because when our heart becomes fashioned together with His, we will find delight in the things that delight Him. And if we delight in His Shabbat, there's a blessing there. But if we make it all about us, see, that's part of the problem. We live in a society and a time today when everything is about me. And it's not. The world doesn't owe you anything. But we surrender ourselves to the one that created everything. And in doing so, He provides blessing. Look, Isaiah 58:13. If you hold back your foot on Shabbat from pursuing your own interests on my holy day, he makes a point of saying, hold your foot back from pursuing your own interests on my holy day. If you call Shabbat a delight, Adonai's holy day, worth honoring, then honor it by not doing your usual things or pursuing your interests or speaking about them. If you do, you will find delight in Adonai, and I will make you ride on the heights of the land and feed you with the heritage of your ancestor, Yaakov, for the mouth of Adonai has spoken. He says, if you do this, you have delight in Adonai, and he will bless you and raise you up. He has said it. He will do it. Right? Psalm 1 through 3. We take pleasure in the things that please the Father. Right? Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. His delight is in what? The law of the Lord, in the Torah of Yahweh. And on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. And all he does, he prospers. Psalm 37:23. The steps of a man are established by Yahweh when he delights in his way. Not when he delights in his way, but when he delights in his way. It says the steps of a man are established by Yahweh when he delights in his way. Psalm 112:1. Praise Yahweh. Blessed is the man who fears Yahweh, who greatly delights in his commandments. Part of the problem is that today we're told his commandments are irrelevant or for a different people. But it says, blessed is the man who fears Yahweh, who delights in his commandments. Good stuff. I pray in this time, this cycle, this season forward, that we turn our hearts to the Father, that we seek his ways, that we surrender our heart to his, and that we continue to grow as a people of Yah. Though we are scattered to the ends of the earth, Yahweh says he will gather us and bring us back. May it be in our times. Amen? All right.